Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable speakers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to be here this morning with the educated people, people who control the money, and people who are the jurists of Pakistan, people who are the distinguished contributors to development of economy of Pakistan. When I was invited to this summit, I was just thinking why my friends have chosen me to come and speak, because I'm not a finance person. But today I realize why I was invited. They knew that we all need to clear our basic concept, and Justice Taqi Usmani Sahab was here. I think that was the reason I was invited, and I greatly benefited from his presentation. Thank you very much, Taqi Sahab. I also looked at the schedule and I said, why am I placed after Justice Taqi Usmani? I also got the answer that since he will be laying out the concepts clear, I don't really have to worry about this because those are not my domain. And I think he has laid the ground for us all to talk about it, to think about how we are going to shape up at the end of the 2 days, what will be the end result of these 2 days deliberation. And I think this is exactly what it appears in the minds of the organizers. Let me now, I will be skipping many of the parts from what I thought I should speak, because I think this will be, figures will be repetition. So I'll skip them, but some of them I'll take it because I think those are the ones which could only be covered by a former technology person, former social, not former, present social worker, and a political worker. I think the theme of the 2-day summit, which when I got, it was the Islamic finance, growth and opportunities. I think it's timely and it is also appropriate initiative. Timely because today the Muslim Ummah is confronted with tremendous challenges, both from within and outside. It is appropriate because despite the vast territories of 75 strong member states of OIC, the large manpower that we talked of, and the rich in natural resources of our countries, the growth in most of our countries remains a mirage. Our challenges, as I see it, and Justice Sahab, allow me to present that, are socio-political and economic. Root cause, however, I believe, appears to be economic. There can be multifarious reasons for weak economies, but it seems that, and I was looking for exactly what a common man can think of what could be the reason for these weak economies. There could be number. And will like to present to you one reason. The reason is that some individuals in the world, not only in Pakistan, some corporations in Pakistan as well as in the world, and some countries of the world have gone in, they are the ones who have started to work on the major, they are in fact have caused major social and political upheaval with consequent inequalities and resultant hardship for the Muslims. Now the question is, why is this so? And who is taking the burden of all this? I'll explain why I say this. Why these individuals, corporations, and the governments, the countries are doing this. But the burden of all this is borne by no other than the common man, the poorest of poor, leading to what we see, we experience every day in each part of the country: terrorism, civil wars in the countries, and at times foreign-induced political disorders, and the changes that you see in the various countries, especially lately you have seen in Muslim countries. in an environment of global imbalance, no country and no society can remain an island in the world of conflicts, confrontations, and chaos. Therefore, the need for common endeavor of all Muslim countries for peace, protection, and perseverance is vital. Islamic scholars like Justice Sahib and many others, and the industry leaders like I can see all of you here, and finance experts and the practitioners in Pakistan also, realizing their responsibility, started exploring ways for transition to Islamic financial system by introducing what we call Islamic banking, mudarbas, takafuls, and sukuks, and various other instruments that you people know much more than what I would be able to spell out. However, Islamic banking, and this is where I would like to draw your attention, is that Islamic banking was first introduced, as I read through, in the second half of the last century. The concepts started coming in 30s and 50s was the one that took off, and we started couple of last quarter of the century. However, some critique went to talk and even went to write, and it is all recorded, it's all there in the world, that Islamic banking isn't Islamic. I think this is the challenge that is posed to not only to us, but to especially the jurists and the practitioners. And they even compared and even went on to compare it to what they call contractum triennius, which was used by the European merchants in the Middle Ages, and to allow the borrowing at usury. I think the word that has been used by you also was usury. I mean, there's no question of profits, returns, yes, but usury is the word which even something that the Christian church fiercely opposed in those Middle Ages. So this battle was going on, and now what we see that in Pakistan and in the Muslim world, the fixed rate came in initially, was offered by the Islamic banking, which was named as profit sharing accounts, have been there, and we have seen a long way we have come, and practitioners have worked to simplify it, and for the comprehension of those critiques who thought it is contractum triennius, and also, and these were Muslim critics who were saying that, and to refine it to ensure it is in line with Islamic jurisprudence injunctions, and various financial practices now are in place, which you have heard and you will hear these 2 days, to institutionalize the Islamic finance. And I think we must keep that in mind, because what is missing in the Muslim world and mainly in Pakistan is we deinstitutionalize everything. Even the political disorder that you see is the result of deinstitutionalizing whatever institutional building may have been done in the past. But thank God, with all of you, the institutions of Islamic finance are coming in. I'm going to miss this, but it was very noteworthy for me to see that Islamic banking is, the numbers I will take yours, and also of the Governor State Bank. Therefore, I'll not like to present the numbers I have because they are here and there. But there are tremendous institutions and billions of dollars that you heard of. But what is that market? Because you and I, who are the marketeer and those what you call bankers, I'm very delighted I'm not a banker after what Justice Saab said, but entrepreneurs and others, we know that what the Standard & Poor's, they identified the potential market of the Islamic finance is $4 trillion. I don't know whether this number is still valid or no, because that is the number I could lay my hand. But what is important is, it was reported that Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia have the biggest Sharia compliant assets that we have. Where we stand in Pakistan, you heard it, you will hear it, so I will skip that totally. But I will only sum it by saying, we have come a long way, but we have a long way to go to see that the fruits of all these endeavors reach the people and the common man. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary General of the OIC, speaking on new vision for the Muslim world, had rightly spelled out challenges in the economic domain faced by us. Some of these, and it's a long list which I'll skip, but some of these I trust are key and therefore I'd like to share with you. One was mentioned was globalization. I think without going into it, you can see what the globalization had the impact on the Muslim world, a negative impact I'm talking. And the heavy burden of the foreign debt. I'm happy, Justice Saab, you mentioned that what is not yours, you cannot trade it. And this is precisely what is happening. And the Muslim countries, and including Pakistan, under the heavy debt that we have come in, foreign debt and the debt servicing. We've got to come out of this cycle. And I urge the participants here to devise methodologies, because you're the leaders in finance. You must ensure that Pakistan comes out of this trap by recommending at the end of this conference. And severe balance of payment difficulties in some member states, market access problems of tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade among Muslim states, and failure to eradicate poverty and disease and basic needs which are below the Millennium Development Goals in Muslim countries. Now this is what the OIC Secretary General had said, and I think I agree with this. I believe Muslim Ummah can overcome these and many other challenges by coming together in summits like this one. And as summit organizers, I read when you people are announcing in the press, I read it, and I quote, to devise collaborative strategies and solutions for the development and promotion of Islamic finance in Pakistan, unquote. All this can be achieved. It is doable, but only when all the stakeholders work in unison as a team in influencing their governments to adopt appropriate programs in not only Pakistan and also abroad, and ensuring that our governments feedback OIC in their meetings at all levels, not only in their summit of the heads of the state, but also in the foreign ministers' conferences, economic groups. They must be able to present what you would like your government to present. And I think this should be one of the recommendations. You must come out of it, out of this meeting, and lend support to the OIC must lend support to the program that you recommend. Governments, in my view, will be better advised in providing the enabling environment and passing necessary laws in meeting these challenges. The ultimate responsibility, however, lies with the people for their role in governance, since I firmly believe that there can be no good government unless there is good citizenship. So the onus is really on us all. Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen, started its endeavor in earnest to introduce Islamic finance in fulfillment of the constitutional obligation which is spelled out in the Constitution of Pakistan. In fact, if you go to the preamble of the Constitution, which is the first page of the Constitution, you will find, and I quote from the Constitution of Pakistan, whereas the Muslims shall be enabled to order their lives in the individual and collective sphere in accordance with the teachings and requirements of Islam as set out in Holy Quran and Sunnah. And that Pakistan, I still continue the quote, that Pakistan would be a democratic state based on Islamic principles and social justice. Please underline the social justice which is enshrined in our Constitution, which is not a constitution of today or constitution of one military government or the other democracy, but it has been unanimously adopted in the 70s. And to cap it all, if you go to the part 1, introduction of the Constitution, it envisages Pakistan as the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Now I think this is all laid down. So the Islamic scholars, jurists, and practitioners in Pakistan, I'm sure you realize the burden of responsibility you carry being the representative of the largest Muslim country in developing and introducing institutions which are Sharia compliant. It is equally important that government and political leadership lend full support to the professionals in discharge of their responsibilities. I see, ladies and gentlemen, this summit as a key step towards forging a common thinking, a common practice, and common systems for betterment of Muslims and humanity. Because if you serve Muslims, you're serving the humanity, because the objectives are all towards the humanity. This, I believe, can be facilitated by adopting a mission which I'm presenting to you for your consideration, for the participants and for the organizer. And the mission should be to ensure that all Islamic financial systems that we talked about, which are in place and which are going to come, should be common man-centric to bring much needed tranquility, transformation, and transition for what you want to achieve is growth. Let me take a minute to explain what I mean by common man-centric. I trust, and you can make a judgment on it, whether I'm thinking correctly or no, in meeting Hukukul Ibad, our obligation will be better served when all Islamic financial instruments, while being Sharia compliant, address the issue of being simple, understandable, high yield to small depositors, but low cost to small borrowers, and accessible to the majority of the people who are illiterate and poor, but yet would like to have funds for halal earning. I think Governor made this remark, and I fully endorse and agree with him that in the rural areas, in the agriculture, which is obviously rural areas, there is not visibly, at least I should not say because I could not see all the rural areas, visibly the Islamic banking. We have seen the microfinance, which is also, I understand, Sharia compliant if it implemented properly, is something microfinancing could go to the rural area, but is it Islamic? Is it Sharia compliant? That is a judgment call which you people have to make, not for me. But I agree with the Governor that we need to do that for them much more than what we have already done. This way, I believe, the concept of Islamic welfare would also be practiced. Islamic financial institutions, which many of them are here, must take lead in what the corporate world, when I used to be in the corporate world, we used to call it CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility Programs. I know that some of the corporations are doing it, but I urge all the Islamic financial institutions to practice CSR far more, because we know what happened to our zakat and others which go in government, how I'm not saying this government or that government, because most of these are not fully compliant, and I would be one person who stopped contributing to zakat, to the government fund, because I think that I would be personally make a better judgment discussing with you, people like you, and getting guidance from Taqi Usmani Sahab on what is zakat and how it should be best used. I think CSR should be practiced, and this can be, in my view, the panacea for the imbalances and hegemony that the empire creation, and the empire creation has been done by the individuals, it has been done by the corporation, it has been done by the countries. Without naming names, you can understand the empire creation has brought in the world. Empire creation on the face of it may look innocent as a means to create capital and provide jobs, opportunity, as well as economic growth. But the way and the means they deploy to create these empires may appear immoral to those who know the pain and suffering of the common man. In fulfillment, so I again repeat, I propose that you adopt this conference, this summit adopts, mission to have all the laws, not only Sharia compliant, but also common man-centric. In fulfillment of this mission, if we were to adopt that, then what will be the objectives? And I propose, number one, uniting Muslim Ummah as one, and people like you, Justice Saab, can play a vital role because of the respect that you command in the Muslim world and also in the non-Muslim world. Uniting Muslim Ummah as one, with private sector taking the lead to face the common man and common enemies like hunger, deprivation, disease, injustice, intolerance, and moral degradation through Islamic finance. Two, adopting preferential treatment laws between Muslim countries like the most favored nation status, granting it to each of the countries. I know there are pressures, we know it in the government, pressures of the Western world not to do this, but I think that is what Muslim world should do. Third, sharing knowledge, resource and experience like the one on an ongoing basis. And my emphasis is on an ongoing basis. It should not be one-off shot. Fourth, calling upon the OIC to focus more closely on its economic programs towards its mandate, and their mandate is to achieve solidarity and cooperation among its member states. And lastly, encourage further the non-Muslim countries where Muslims live to adopt Islamic financial system. But this can only come if we have done it in our own country. In closing, I must thank the organizers inviting me, and I want to congratulate the organizers, particularly Publicitas, for closely supported by the State Bank, lead partner, Bank Al Falah, and also Al Barka, the joint or the co-lead partner, as well as I can see my former company, IBM, being part of the technical partner, and many others. There are big names, and I'm happy, and I want to congratulate them for participating in it. But special words for the conferences and new initiative for bringing a galaxy of the industry specialists, leaders, academicians, and Sharia scholars, regulators, and from Pakistan together on one platform in Pakistan. Organizers, I believe, have put in a rich program for the 2 days, and with the distinguished participants that I see, the summit I'm sure, will be a historic success and a milestone in moving towards ameliorating the conditions of Muslims. I certainly think that this is the time which I like to offer prayer, that I wish and pray that the summit deliberation is a great success because its success will be success for the people of Pakistan, for the Muslim Ummah, and for the world. Thank you very much.